Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Pixley for President. I am still Jared Pixley, and I am still running for president. So, before we begin this week, I just need to correct myself. In my episode on the social duties of the president video, I say that during the state dinners, each course lasts 55 minutes. I spoke wrong. What I meant was the meal has 5 courses and the meal itself lasts 55 minutes. So that is 11 minutes per course. So, this week I wanted to discuss something that I've seen in the news a bit recently, and that is the Presidential Records Act. So, in 1974, following the Watergate scandal, President Richard Nixon saw that he was about to be impeached and removed from office. His supporters turned away from him, so he decided to resign from office instead. His resignation speech was broadcast over the radio across the country. Right after his resignation, Congress passed the Presidential Recordings and Materials Preservation Act and seized all of his tapes, the ones that he had used to record all of his conversations while in office, before he could destroy them. The law was intended to reduce secrecy and allow historians to do their job. Nixon's former vice president and then president, Gerald Ford, signed the act into law in December of 1974, just 2 months after taking office. Nixon waged a series of court battles against this act. He wanted his recordings back and claimed that the law was unconstitutional. He and his lawyers argued that it violated the separations of powers and the executive privilege. However, his efforts failed. In 1978, Congress passed another law, the Presidential Records Act. This was signed into law by the new president, Jimmy Carter. The Presidential Records Act was an updated version of the previous law. This law applies to all records that the president creates, including memos, text messages, and emails. Records covered by the PRA encompass documentary materials relating to the political activities of the president or members of the president's staff, if they concern or have an effect on the carrying out of constitutional, statutory, or other official or ceremonial duties of the president. This law also created the National Archive and Records Administration, or NARA. Their job is to oversee these records and presidential libraries to display these materials to the public. The state of the law applies to the president and members of his staff, including the vice president. Now, there are certain exceptions in the law and specific criteria for what records are included. A note that the president writes on the back of a napkin may or may not be saved, depending on what the note is about. And now, I want to write the note on the back of a napkin that will be saved and displayed in my presidential library. All of these documents are saved for 5 years. This allows them all to be reviewed by the Archivist of the United States, and lets the administration argue about what should or should not be saved. Sorting out official stuff from personal correspondences. It also allows enough time to pass that the secret information is no longer that dangerous to be released, though anything still classified will not be displayed to the public. Now, a word about presidential libraries. Right now, there are 16 that are operated by NARA, with a couple more that are independent. Herbert Hoover, Franklin Roosevelt, all the way up through Obama have presidential libraries as part of NARA, though Barack Obama's Presidential Center is scheduled to open June of this year, and it's actually jointly owned by the Obama Foundation and the University of Chicago. They just give NARA access to the space to display his material. Various presidents before Hoover have their own libraries, but they are not part of NARA. They're usually some sort of, historical foundation. Trump's and Biden's libraries are still in the planning. At any of the NARA libraries, you can get a passport. If you get it stamped at all 16 libraries, you get a special commemorative token. Though with what gas prices are right now, it's probably not the best time for a library road trip. These libraries don't just have the former president's emails and documents. They also display gifts received from foreign leaders and even the gowns that the first ladies wore to certain events. But why are we talking about this? Sure, it's interesting. At least I think it is. But the PRA is in the news right now. Trump is trying to overturn the law. He had his Department of Justice write a memo using the same arguments that Nixon had used as evidence he does not need to obey the law. Liz Oyer, a former pardon attorney for the DOJ, did a video on this, which you should see the link below. Trump does not want anyone to find evidence of his corruption and incompetence, which is the purpose of this law, to reduce the secrecy. But there's more. Trump has never liked the Presidential Records Act. At the end of his first administration, he took boxes of records with him instead of turning them over to NARA. The government spent months asking for them back. Finally, they got a warrant, and the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago to get them back. However, some boxes were still missing, and some of Trump's staff had said in dispositions that they had moved some boxes to Bedminster before the raid. Now, this was just before a group of Arabians visited Trump at Bedminster. Among the boxes recovered, there were 4 folders of classified nuclear secrets, some that he would show off to his visitors. I believe it was an Australian businessman that had been at a party at Mar-a-Lago, said that Trump had showed him secret plans for a U.S. nuclear submarine. Now, that's a bit of a tangent, so back on topic. Trump does not like the Presidential Records Act and does not want his corruption and incompetence to be revealed, so he is trying to overturn the law. However, there is already a lawsuit against him about this, so we might see this in court. Since Nixon, no other president has challenged the law. Ford and Carter both signed the bills into law. Both of the Bushes, Reagan, Clinton, Obama, and Biden followed the law, though some of them did try to nitpick certain details. There were executive orders about what did and did not have to be saved. During this time, Reagan was involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, and he didn't want those records coming to light, though they did. Except for the ones that got shredded. However, none of these presidents thought that there was a case to overthrow the law outright. They just argued about what papers did and did not apply. This law has stood for almost 50 years. This makes me believe that Trump has done something worse than all of them that he wants to keep secret. Something worse than Iran-Contra. Something worse than Watergate. Why else would he not want these things to come to light in the future? If elected president, which I hope I will be, I have no problem following this law. NARA can keep all of my records. And like I said, I'll write stuff on the back of a napkin just so they can save the napkin. I will see that everything I do will be displayed in the Jared Pixley Presidential Library in the middle of nowhere, New York. And I'm smart enough that I won't do anything that I don't want to be displayed. That's just common sense, which a lot of these leaders seem to be lacking. And I hope that common sense is enough to get me a few votes. I want to thank everyone for joining me this week. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. As you know, all of my links are in the box below. You can find my book on Amazon. And if Liz Oyer is watching, thank you, and please contact me. I'd love to talk with you about the DOJ and stuff. And please join me again next week for another video. Have a wonderful day.